Welcome back, YouTube. Today I'm going to walk you through some of the biggest tips I can give you if you want to get great results with your fat loss and be successful. Okay, so one of the biggest issues people have when it comes to fat loss is that they are going all out at the beginning. Okay, they're very excited and they're throwing everything into their goal. People will go from doing zero when it comes to energy expenditure to everything. Training 5-6 days a week, doing 2 classes in a day. So I've been a coach for many years, and I've helped a lot of different people with their fat loss goals. Okay, so I've got a good idea of the struggles most people have, and therefore the tips and ways to try and get around those struggles. Okay, if we can avoid these struggles and or mistakes that people often have or make, then we're going to put ourselves in a very good position to get good fat loss results. Number one, we're going to start with flexibility. Now, when I talk about flexibility, for the most part, I'm talking about flexibility when it comes to nutrition. Okay, one of the biggest mistakes and struggles people make is that when it comes to food intake, they're very restrictive on what they can have. Okay, most people don't want to just stick to the same foods day in, day out. Don't want to feel like they have to restrict foods because then you're not going to enjoy your diet. And if you're not going to enjoy your diet, what you're eating, you ain't going to stick to it for very long. Let me tell you. Now, here's the big takeaway. You don't need to do any of that. You don't need to be restrictive. You don't need to eat the same things day in, day out. You can be very flexible with your diet and you can still drop body fat. You just have to understand that what you're taking in needs to be less than what you're burning. So if you can maintain a calorie deficit, okay, while you're including the foods you enjoy, let's say square bars, yes, you can eat square bars and still drop body fat. Shocker, I know. But if you're making sure that you're staying within a calorie deficit and including those foods in your diet isn't going to take you out of that calorie deficit, you're absolutely fine. Someone who enjoys their diet is going to stick to it a lot better than someone who hates their diet. If you can stick to it, you can be consistent, you're more likely to get the results that you're after. So be flexible with your diet, okay? Don't be silly. Number 2, energy management is what I'm going to call this one. I'm going to sit down for this one because, well, why not? Okay, so one of the biggest issues people have when it comes to fat loss is that they are going all out at the beginning. Okay, they're very excited and they're throwing everything into their goal. People will go from doing zero when it comes to energy expenditure to everything. Training 5-6 days a week, doing 2 classes in a day, doing endless cardio. Couple that with then reducing food intake because they're trying to do the right thing in terms of putting themselves in a calorie deficit. But if you're not very good at managing your energy, so again, the energy you're taking in plus the energy you're expending, if you're not good at managing that and you're doing so much output and little intake, which a lot of people do, it often leads to just burning yourself out very quickly. And if you burn yourself out, well, you can't stick to your goal. What you want to do instead is try and start with the minimum effective. So what I mean by that is you're doing the absolute minimum while still getting the response that you want. For example, you're going to try and eat as much food as you can while being in a deficit, and you're going to try and do as little exercise as you can while being in a deficit, okay? But still getting, because you're in a deficit, a fat loss response. So let's say you're trying to drop 2 pounds a week, okay? You're going to keep food as high as you can and keep energy output as low as you can while still dropping 2 pounds a week. Once you do that, you're then going to find it a lot easier to manage that deficit over a long period of time, rather than you just going crazy and firing expenditure up as high as you can and intake as low as you can, and then within a few weeks having to pull back or completely backfiring and find yourself back at square one. So get good at managing your energy. Lastly, we have recovery. When I'm talking about recovery, I don't just mean recovery from training side of things. I also mean recovery from a mental aspect, so stress management, de-stressing. Okay, now the reason why recovery in those 2 departments is so important is because if you're not recovering well, your goal is going to be 10 times harder. Let's start with a stress management point of view. Okay, when you go into a deficit, there's a lot more stressors. Okay, being in a deficit itself is a stressor. If we're not managing these stressors alongside life stressors, which everyone has, we're going to find it very difficult to cope with the goal at hand. Okay, If you're in a stress state, you're going to find it harder to make better decisions, and these decisions can then play into intake, so food choices, energy expenditure, what we decide to do, if we decide to train on a day or not, even just time management, okay, making sure we stay on the ball with things, doing what needs to be done. If we're in a stress state, all of that becomes a lot harder, okay. We all know the feeling of being overwhelmed with so many things to do and just being stressed. You almost don't want to do anything. Secondly, if we're not recovering well from training, our expenditure is going to take a big hit, okay. Not only from the calories that we're burning, but secondly, especially if, again, when it comes to fat loss, retention of muscle is important. If our training performance, that training stimulus that we're trying to give ourselves, isn't good because we're not recovering well, then all of a sudden our muscle retention efforts might not be as great. So we need to prioritise recovery, and a big part of that is sleep. Okay, we've got to prioritise sleep, we've got to prioritise recovery. If you recover very well and you prioritise recovery, I can almost guarantee you that your goal will be 10 times easier. So there you have it. 3 big tips when it comes to fat loss. Hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please drop a like. If you have any questions, throw them down below and I'll get back to you. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.